Hey, good morning, nerds. Welcome to session 3 of the cookie clicker tutorial. In today's session, we are going to be working on power-ups and making some upgrades to our game. And here's kind of our design philosophy for this one. What my end goal is. We could do this in a very, very tedious kind of a way where we just manually create each individual power-up that we want to do. But the more power-ups you have, the longer that this is going to take, and the more steps and the more things you have to remember to do, etc. More code we have to mess with, more game objects we have to mess with. And then the other downer is that we want to protect ourselves, quote unquote, protect ourselves from our designers, make it really easy on our designers. So my goal is that the game designer really only needs to look at the game manager, and everything to do with all of the power-ups ought to be right here where they can control it. And this is the like a one-stop shop. So it's like you just teach your game manager, or I'm sorry, not your game manager, your game designer, hey, go look at the game manager. It's right there. Here's all the stuff you can touch. Don't touch anything else. And they should be able to adjust the parameters of the game and make it more interesting in a very, very scalable kind of a way. So there's our target goal, okay? So our first thing that we want to do is lay down some groundwork to make that happen. And kind of like what we did when we set up our game manager initially, we made things a little bit extra complicated, more than maybe it felt like they needed to be. In order to build up for this moment right now, and into our next couple of moments, what we're going to be doing through tutorial 4 is expanding on this and adding more versatility to something without having to add a whole ton of extra code and make it even clunkier. So for now, this is great. It's working, but what we're going to do is we're going to add some functionality. So we're going to go into Game Manager here. And we're going to add the main thing that we're going to add to this one is what's called a struct. And the struct is a way to store data. It's kind of like a class. And again, depending on your programming language, a struct and a class may be more or less different from each other. In C#, there's some very, very key differences, but like I'm an old C++ programmer. In C++, literally the only difference between a struct and a class is that one defaulted public and one defaulted private. In C#, there's a lot more differences than that. And normally what we would do is we kind of want to gauge, this is a systems architect kind of a thing, but we want to think about like where should that data be? And sometimes people put it inside the same class file. Sometimes you would make a separate class file for it, and it just kind of depends on your game and what is going to be accessing it. In this case, the only thing that's really going to be accessing it directly is going to be my game manager, so I feel pretty good just putting it right here. You'll notice that I'm leaving the curly brace. We usually don't do that. I'm going outside the curly brace for this one to create this. Normally we don't want to do this, and again, there's some schools of thought that say we should do it not here, we should create its own file for it, etc. And all of those things make sense, but our entire code base for this is going to be 3 class files total. I don't feel like that's hard to look through to find our data, but if I was going to do a more complicated program, I certainly might break this out. So for today, we're going to just do it right here. And so we're going to do a public struct, and we're going to call it PowerUp. And we need to define a power-up is just basically, the reason we use a struct instead of a class for this kind of thing is structs are ideal for just being data containers with maybe a simple function or two. We're not going to create any really complicated objects. They're not going to have weird behaviors. They're just very, very simple things. And simple things are good for structs. So we're going to do a public string. And so we need to define what goes into a power-up. And one of the things that we are going to need, because this is going to help us keep track, is power-up name. We are also going to do a float for how much cache does it contribute when you click on it, or I'm sorry, when you click, how much does this power-up contribute to that click? And then we're going to do the same thing with cash per second. And then we need to give it a start cost, like how much does it cost to buy it the first time? So we're going to go public float start cost. What level is it? So like how many times have you purchased it? Let's see here. We need to know, this will make more sense in a moment, but public float a cost multiplier. And this is going to be used to determine how much money it costs to buy the next one. We'll see that in just a second. And then the last one we're going to do is very, very similar to how we're doing our cash per click, etc. Is going to be public float next cost. And we're going to do a get for this one. And so the way that this is going to work is if somebody asks me what the next cost of my power up is, we're going to determine that by like what level it is and by a little bit of math. So for example, actually for now, let's just go ahead and put this in and then I'll explain the code. So we're going to go return start cost plus parentheses, and the parentheses aren't really necessary, but it's going to help visualize our problem here. Cost multiplier times level. And definitely order of operations, the parentheses are extraneous. What we're trying to do here is make it easier to read the intent of the math problem, which is locking my multiplication together. And so what we're going to do here is, for example, let's say that my start cost of my object was 10. So the first time you buy one, it's 10. And so my level, because I haven't bought it yet, is 0. And let's say I put a 2 in here. And these are just some hypothetical numbers. We are actually going to use these numbers later, but for now it's just hypotheticals. So what's going to happen here is to determine what my cost of leveling this up to level 1 is, because right now it's at level 0, you would take the start cost, which is 10. We would add to it the multiplier times the level, which 0 times 2 is going to be 0, and this would total at 10. And that's kind of a convoluted way to get to 10, but now let's look at the next scenario. Let's say I've done that 10, I paid it, my level is now 1, so I have 1 of this power up. And now what's going to happen is the next time I go to purchase it, I'm going to take my 10 that I originally had plus 1 times 2, and that's going to mean my second purchase is going to cost 12. And my third purchase would cost 14, and my fourth purchase would cost 15 or 16, etc. Basically going on into infinity. We're not really telling it where it stops. We could add a cap later if we wanted to, but we'd have to create a variable for that. So basically it'll just kind of extend out forever. And we can adjust that power up by power up. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create an array of power-ups, and that's going to help us basically put everything where it needs to go in that game manager. So what we're going to do here is put in, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. We're going to go ahead and put in that array. So we're going to go public power-up bracket bracket power-ups, and this says, hey, make an array out of these power-ups. So we should see not just a single power-up, we should see a group of power-ups. And so we're going to go ahead and save that and tag back into Unity. And looking at our game manager, what you're going to notice is if we look at game manager, we don't see those. And kind of the question is, why not? So let's go back at our code, and whoops, let's try that again. Let's go back to our code. We did make it public. It should be there. Why isn't it there? And the reason is because by default, Unity doesn't really know how to recognize a struct. It's not what we would call serialized data by default. The cool thing is there's an easy conversion in the system class that allows us to do this. It makes it really easy. We're just going to put a square bracket there and do system.serializable. If we save that, that teaches system.serializable is useful for a lot of things. We use it a lot for things like being able to send data over a network or save data to a file or things like that. But if we tab back to our Unity project, you're going to notice that now it shows up as a list. And it's going to default to an empty list because we haven't created anything. But if I add a member, look at that, now I can create a new power up. So my first power up, I want to call this one, let's call this chef training. And I'm going to make my cash per click 1. It's going to give you 1 extra cash every single time you've purchased it per click. No extra cash per second, and we're going to use those numbers that I was talking about earlier. So I'm going to go 10, we'll leave the level at 0 by default, and the cost multiplier is going to be 2. Now, 2 is actually a pretty low number. You're going to notice that this is very, very trivializing, and I'm not very, very happy with this. But it'll be faster and easier to test. So we're going to use low numbers in the beginning, and our game designer can always come through and make this better later. And so now that I've finished that one, we can bundle it, but we can also hit plus and we can create another one, and it's going to default to the same numbers as before, but we could add additional variables in later, but I went ahead and clicked the minus sign for now to get rid of that second one. So we've got this. And now it's just a matter of trying to use it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create a power up. And this is where we're going to get into that new those new UI extensions that we downloaded back in Unit 1. We're going to go ahead and use those now. So I'm going to go ahead and save my scene because I don't always remember to do that. And we're going to go into Canvas, we're going to right click, we're going to go to UI extensions, sliders, and we're going to use this radial slider, which is one of my favorite out of the new things. And the reason I like this one so much is that it gives us just a lot of really, really easy to configure options for visualizing. And if I open this up and I go down to my slider, just to show you how this thing works, you're going to see under the second image, we've got fill amount, and I can basically change that amount, and you're going to see basically it kind of increasing and turning more red the higher we get. Now, this is normally intended for something like a countdown. So normally we start it at full and we count down over time, and as we run out of time, it fills in like for a progress bar or something like that. So this is like I have like a lot to go, and I'm about halfway there, and now I'm almost complete. But the really cool thing is we've got a lot of different methods. We can fill it radially. So we can fill 90-degree radial, which kind of goes off of the corner. We can do this on the 180, which is more like a windshield wiper almost. Or we can do the 360, which is the one that I like better for this particular case. We can also adjust where does that fill origin start. And by default, it started over there on the left. It re-defaulted to bottom after I've changed some things. But really, we need to make some other changes to this because I want it to basically start off red and turn green when I have enough cache for the object, which is kind of my intent. I want to make it kind of fill in as we get cache. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the radial slider, not the slider, the radial slider. And I'm going to change the color on that one to red because that's kind of how I want it to start. And then I'm going to change my slider. I'm going to change the color to green. And now I'm going to go 02550 just to give it that nice bright green. And now what's going to happen is when I'm at 0, it's red, and when I'm at 100, it's green. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it to top instead. And this is going to make it feel more like the clock filling in. So like I don't have any money, and now I have all the money I need in order to buy this power up. And so that's going to make it feel a little bit more natural, I think, in terms of trying to get that power up filled up. Okay, so now that I've got that, now we just need to play around with the image a little bit. I don't like the default button. It's not terrible, but we could definitely do better. And I did make all these extra sprites. So what I'm going to do here is take the radial slider graphic and change it to my gray circle. And because the circle is gray and we're broadcasting a red light onto it, because that's really what color is in this context, is it's just spraying red light. You'll notice that that kind of turned the circle red, but we still have this ugly green square as the main one, and that's because it has its own image. And you can use that to juxtapose between two different images, or you can just juxtapose between one image with two different light settings, which is really what we're doing. And so now what we have is, look at that, I've got 0%, and as it fills in, we go to 100, and that looks really great. This is going to look really good. Okay, so now I definitely don't want it on my cookie. I want my power-ups to kind of be over here on the right. So I'm going to just drag, whoops, that is not what I wanted. We're going to Control Z that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my radial slider, and I'm just going to drag that over here to the right. And don't worry about getting too finesse with this. You know, I've spent a lot of time on some of the other things, really kind of adjusting their positioning. With this one, we're going to do a different trick later, so it's not as important. I'm going to set my width and my height on this kid to about 150. That gives it a pretty decent size, but it's not, you know, kind of overwhelming my buttons. And you know, I'm not exactly thrilled with that, so we're going to drop that down to maybe 120. So 120 by, yeah, I like that a lot better. Okay, so we're going to go 120 by 120 just to kind of keep it in proportion. And then we're going to go into where the slider is. We're going to add another button inside of this. So this is going to be our UI telling us, can we afford the power up? And then we're going to add another button to actually buy the power up. So we're going to right click on the slider. We're going to go to my UI. We're going to add a simple button text mesh pro. And then what I'm going to do here is just double click on the radial slider, and that's going to zoom us in so we can actually just kind of work with it more zoomed in and see what we're doing. So I'm going to take that button and we're going to adjust it a little bit. I want my width to be, let's say 100 for now, and my height to be about 100. And then I'm going to swap it for one of these other graphics, and I want my first one to be chef training. So I'm going to grab my chef training button and drag it over top the sprite. And that looks pretty good. I like that red rim. We can see a little bit of the bright red poking out, but not a ton of it. And then the last thing I want to adjust here is this Text Mesh Pro. I want to actually set the text, so I'm going to expand. I'm going to grab the Text Mesh Pro. I'm going to move the bottom of it up just a hair. And then I'm going to go down into my Text Mesh Pro settings, and under alignment, I'm going to click the bottom alignment. And that's going to put my text kind of at the bottom of the button, but still not completely obscuring, but it's going to cover up my guy a little bit. I don't know if I want the text there or not, but I kind of like it, so it's fine. Okay, and so now what we've got is we can kind of run the game now. And I've got my little button there in the top right corner. It is interacting, but what we can't see is the cash per click is not being affected at all, which makes sense because we haven't added any behavior, and it's certainly not reacting to, can I afford the thing? I'm already at $10. I should be able to buy it, but it's not showing me that I can. So we need to fix both of those things. So we could write a bunch of different scripts here. That's always an option that control different things. Again, I'm going to kind of try to keep it to 1 or 2 scripts at a time. And so we're going to write our PowerUp script. And again, because Game Manager is doing most of the work, we really don't want PowerUp script to be too convoluted. This is mostly going to control our visualization and then also try to interact with Game Manager directly. So we're going to add a component, make sure again it's on the radial slider. Actually, while we're here, I'm going to take radial slider and rename this to PowerUp button. just so that way I know what that object is, and all this stuff is just child objects of it at this point. And then we are going to, while we have PowerUp button highlighted, I'm going to add a component, and we are going to add a PowerUp script, and then we're going to go ahead and go into it. Okay. So for now, we're going to keep this relatively simple. So we do want to reference the number, and that's really what's going to drive everything. So remember that we're setting our power-ups and we're creating them over in Game Manager. So I don't want to replicate any work. We generally want to avoid any position where we have to do data in more than one spot. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use a reference, what we'd call a reference index. So we're going to say public int powerup num is going to be the number of the powerup that we're trying to target. And then we need some other data. So the first thing I want to do is work on that visualization of making that ring go to green as it levels up. So we're going to go, so to do that we need to tackle the slider. So we're going to do public radial slider, slider. And again, just like what we did with the Text Mesh Pro, that's not enabled. And so what I'm going to do is do a quick action refactoring, and I'm finding that that is using Unity engine.ui.extensions, which makes some sense because that's part of the new extensions package. And hey, look, it works now. That's great. We also need to access the Game Manager script. Like we did last time, we're going to call that GameMan. We also will need to know we'll do those ones later. Okay, so for now I just want to mess with that slider. So now what we're going to do, I don't want to try to find the slider because it's in a child object. That's kind of a pain in the butt. So we'll do that when, that's why we made that one public. We'll do that with a drag. But the Game Manager, we have two ways of doing this. We could just type it out, or we could do what I'm going to do, which is it's the exact same code that we used in our text object. So I'm just going to copy paste all of this, Control C. I'm going to go to my PowerUp object and Control V. Because we used GameMan in both and we're trying to tackle the same Game Manager in both of them, hey look, that's done. I don't have to do that again. And then now it's time to start doing some code. So again, I'm worried about what is the number that should be fed into our radial slider to make it show this percentage. Okay. For us, what I want you to note is that it's a percentage using the 0 to 1 scale. So kind of like your calculator would do it. So for example, half is 0.5. I'm at 51.4%, which is 0.514. And so it's basically just a ratio. And so what I'm going to do is in my code here, and I'm going to want that number for a few other things. So we're going to just we're going to create a variable for it so we don't have to solve it multiple times. I'm going to say, hey, my float ratio is going to be equal to game manager dot cache. So how much cache do I have over what is the next cost of the PowerUp that I'm looking at? So we're going to do GameMan.PowerUps PowerUp num dot next cost. And we haven't really referenced it like this, so I'm going to demonstrate here. If PowerUp num, we're going to start this at PowerUp num 0. That's going to look for in programming, most things start counting at 0. So the first one is 0, the second one is 1, the third one is 2, etc. And that's why when we created our PowerUp, it was element 0. So if I have a 0 here, it's going to say, hey, look for PowerUps number 0, which is our chef training. And what is the next cost of that? And that's going to use that next cost formula to figure it out. And so, for example, the first time it'll be 10. And so our game manager, it should be whatever our cache is divided by 10. So if we have one cache, it should be 10%, 20%, 30%, etc. Expressed as a decimal, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc. Okay, and then all we've got to do now is we need to tell the slider to use it. So we're going to say, hey, slider dot radial image dot fill amount I want you to do that to the amount of ratio. So the radial image is the object, fill amount is that percentage. We're going to say, hey, set your fill amount to whatever the ratio is. And then that's actually about it. Now it should show us our stuff. Now this isn't going to quite work. There's one thing that we missed, but let's see what happens. Okay, so when I run this, theoretically, as I gain cash, it should start out red. As I gain cash, it should get better, but it's not. How come? And actually, we've got an error here. If we look at it, it says, hey, object reference is not set to an index of an object. And that is a really common error that you're going to see. And it's even saying, hey, it's on line 23 here. And again, if we look at line 23, that is our slider.radial image. So it tells me, oh, we forgot to set the slider. So if I go into my PowerUp button and I go to my code and we look at slider, hey, there's nothing there. We need to actually drag in the slider into that. And if we do that, not only do we no longer have errors, as we click, look at that, that slider is filling in, and now it should work, but we're not seeing any increase in our cash per click. So that's our next thing that we've got to fix. I do want to do a little bit more. Well, no, actually, we'll swing back to that in a minute. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is actually set up some code to make that work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my game manager, and we need to create a way for it to level up. And I want to do it here, kind of like we have cookie clicked, because again, I want my game manager to control all of this stuff. So we're going to go and say, hey, what we're going to do here is we are going to go, sorry, I'm trying to find my notes. We're going to create a level up function. And so we're going to do, there we go. Public void level power up. Whoops, whoa, not that. Let's try that again. Level power up. And that's going to be int and a PowerUp num. And inside of that, what we're going to want to do is figure out how to do that. So every time you level up a PowerUp, there's going to be two things that need to happen. The first one is that we need to subtract some cash. So we're going to say cash minus equals PowerUps, and we're going to look at the index of pnum, and we're going to say dot next cost. So we're going to say, hey, however much that PowerUp is supposed to cost, subtract that from your cash. And then we're going to do PowerUps pnum dot level. We want to add 1 to that, and the shortcut for adding 1 to something is plus plus. So we're just going to do PowerUps pnum dot level plus plus, and that should go ahead and increase it by 1. So now if we run this, oh wait, we need to do one more little thing. And actually, I want to try something because I'm not sure if this is going to work. This isn't how I have it coded in my own. So we're going to check something real fast here. So I'm going to take this button and say, hey, when we click on it, and honestly, I don't think this is going to work, but we're going to try this. So when we click on it, what do I want to do? I want to go to Game Manager. I want to go to my Game Manager script. I want to do level power up. And the number I want to pass in, yeah, that's what I was worried about. I was hoping that it would let us put in a variable here instead. Oh, wait, it might. No, we can't do it like that. Okay. Like I said, I was hoping for something different, but that's okay. So we can't use the data that we have in our other script, which is unfortunate. So what we're going to have to do instead is what I was kind of afraid of, but how I have it in my other code, is we're going to have to add a function to actually get that number, the correct number in here. because again, I don't want my game manager to have to go through and set all those numbers and stuff every time. So we're going to go to PowerUp script, and we're just going to create a function that does this for us. So we're going to go here in our PowerUp script, and I'm just going to create a function called clicked. And all we're going to do here is we're going to go to Game Manager. We're going to set that level PowerUp function that we just wrote, and we're going to pass in our own PowerUp num. And so we're just going to do it that way, so that way it'll pass in the 0 or the 1 or the 57 or whatever the number of the PowerUp is that we're using. We're going to go ahead and save that. And then instead of calling Game Manager here, in our button, what we're going to do is we're going to call our PowerUp button, and then we're going to go to PowerUp script and say clicked, and that will trigger it with our own PowerUp number. And that was the way I did it in my original tutorial, but I had forgotten whether or not we could try it that other way. Okay, so we've gotten enough level, so let's try this. We're going to go ahead and click it, and my cash per click did not increase, but my cash went down. And the other problem that I'm having now, so my cash per click didn't go up, and actually when I click it, I'm noticing that my cash per click is not going up. But also, so we need to fix that, and then also I can go negative. I can keep on clicking this. I am noticing though I'm at 574 in the negative, that's what the parentheses mean, and it's decreased all the way to 626, which means that that increase is actually working. And if we go to Game Manager and look at it, I am at level 22, which is pretty impressive. And that level is going up, so that clicked function is working in a way. But it's not limiting. So basically, like if I don't have enough money, it's still letting me purchase the PowerUp anyways. And it's also not updating my cash per click. So we have two things that we need to fix here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to fix the click functionality first, and then we'll fix the cash per click. So we're going to go back into our button code. And really what we want to do here is actually not in our code. We're going to look at the button itself. What we're going to do is I'm just going to disable that button. So we're going to say, hey, button, we're going to uninteractable you, and you're going to notice how it dims out a little bit. And that's good. I want that button kind of dimmed and not working until it's filled. But what I want to do is also kind of adjust the interactability of it. So we're going to go back into our code here, and we are going to say, hey, we do need to add one more thing to this. Actually, we're going to add two more things to this because we're also going to change our visual display. I'm going to add two more objects. I'm going to add a button. So I'm going to go public button. Oh yeah, the auto type is getting messy here. Public button, my button. And we're going to add a public text mesh pro GUI for my text. And neither of those work. We're going to add their respective things. So I'm going to right click quick actions and refactorings. This time I've got a few options. I want Unity Engine UI, not UI elements, just regular UI. And then the other one, of course, I want TMP or TM Pro. And in here in my ratios and stuff like that, we are going to add some more code. We're going to say mybutton.interactable is a Boolean, so I need a true false value, and I'm just going to say, hey, it's going to be ratio is greater than or equal 1. So if the ratio is greater than or equal to 1, that button should be true. If the ratio is less than 1, it should be false, which will keep that button from being able to be clicked in advance. But I also want that text to dim out. So I'm going to go my text dot color. We're going to gray it out as it's not usable. Is going to be equal to a new color. And the cool thing is we're going to lay down just gray light. So If we go 0, 0, 0, that would lay down black light, which would make it black. If we go 1, 1, 1, it would be white light, which is going to be white, or which will change it to the colors that it is because it'll be lit correctly. But if we use ratio, comma, ratio, this is one of my favorite tricks, ratio, and actually we can do ratio again, and that's going to give us actually the alpha channel as well. So it'll start graying itself out. Actually, I don't want it to be, let's just do 3, because I don't want it to turn invisible because I want to be able to see what it is. But it'll turn black as it's not text or not able to be clicked on. And that's going to give us a pretty good spot. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And actually, the last thing that I want to do is that text, it just says button. And this is going to help us as we move forward. I could just manually type in that it's the chef's training, but really what I want it to do is read that data out of our library and also tell us how much it's going to cost. So I'm going to add one more thing. I'm going to say my text dot text, text. And we're going to use some of the tricks that we learned in one of the previous parts of this module. We're going to say, hey, I want to go game manager dot powerups of powerup num dot powerup name. And then I also want to know how much it's going to cost. So we're going to do plus, and then I'm going to do a \n and an open parentheses, and then a plus, and then I'm going to line break, but you guys don't have to. GameMan dot powerups powerup num dot next cost dot toString. Again, we're going to see to that, all lowercase. And then we're just going to add that closing parenthesis and a semicolon. Okay, now that we've done that, we should be able to see everything and it should be nice and pretty. And it should disable our button when we're not allowed to click on it. And that is actually, believe it or not, all of the code that we're going to put on the button. We're not going to be adding any more code there. Everything else is going to be on the game manager. It is freaking out because we haven't set it to an instance of the object. So we are going to go back into that power up button. We're going to scroll down. We need a button and some text. I've got my button right there. And we've got our text right there. And now when I run it, hey, look at that. It says chef training for $10 and it's the text is blacked out. We do still have that edge border there, but as we click, it's starting to turn green and the button is lit up and now I can click on it. I can't click on it. I'm really trying. I can't click on it right now, so that's good. It's deactivated. But when we get up to $12, we are able to click on it. Now it won't light up again until I get to 14. Now it won't light up again until we get to 16. So that is definitely working. What's not working now is the cash per click, so we need to fix that next. But that's going to be a pretty easy fix. So, okay, so for our next trick, we need to actually get that cash per click to work. And fortunately for us, that all happens in Game Manager. So if we go back to our Game Manager script, here's our problem. We look for cash per click, but right now we're only returning $1 for all of those. So what we need to do is make that actually respect the power up. So we need it to respect the power up. Instead of just returning 1 every time, we need it to actually give us the value of whatever that power up is. And actually we need it to go through all of the potential power-ups. So what if there's 15 different power-ups that all add cash per click in different amounts? So what we need to do is figure out an efficient way to go through all of them, add them all together, and then add that. And so for cash per click, what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves an extra line here. What we're going to do with this one is, sorry, I'm looking for my note. Get cash per click. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to start a new float. We're going to call it CPC for cash per click. And we're going to start it at 1.0f, just like it should be. And then we're going to return cash per click, which is basically an even more convoluted way of getting us exactly back where we started again. But now we can do stuff in between. We can mess with that CPC variable, increase it according to whatever power-ups there are, and then when we return it, it'll be the correct value. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a thing called a for each to look through all the values. And this isn't necessarily the most efficient way to do things. For each is not optimized code, but it makes it easier for us to read and to understand. So we're going to go for each, and we're going to do powerup p in powerups. And what this is going to do is this is going to go through that list of powerups, that array, and it's going to go through each one in turn and temporarily give it the variable p. So the first time it happens, it'll take powerup 0, assign it to p, and say, hey, you can do things with p that are whatever you needed to do that array item. Then when it's finished and it hits this little curly brace, now it'll be powerup 1, then it'll be powerup 2, then it'll be powerup 3, powerup 57, powerup 82, until we're out of powerups. Even though right now we only have 1, again, we're going to plan on adding some more later. Okay, so what we're going to do is every single time, what I want to do is I want to take CPC, which is my cash per click, and I want to add to it, so plus equals, whatever my PowerUps cash per click value is times that PowerUps level. And so if the cash per click is 0, like for example, maybe it's a cash per second PowerUp, it doesn't really matter what that level is. It's going to multiply 0 times that level. It's going to add 0. But if it's a thing like the one that we're looking at that adds 1, it'll add 1 per click times a level of maybe 3, because we've powered it up 3 times. It'll add 3 to that. Later on, if we have power-ups that give you maybe 10 cash per click or 15 cash per click, and it's level 3, then that might be adding 45. So those can get exponential quite quickly, depending on our power-ups. So we can have more advanced power-ups later. And so this should just make this work. We're going to go ahead and save that. And now what we should have is our cash per click is only $1. I'm going to click it a few times. I'm going to buy a chef's upgrade. Look at that. It now says $2. I currently have 1 cash. If I click it again, look at that. It's $3 now. And I'm going up on odd numbers. I'm going to buy another chef's upgrade. That's bumping me up to 3 per click. And it is going up 3 per click. And I can just keep on doing that basically as many times as I want to. And we're seeing that increase happen. Again, it's happening kind of opposite what you'd want. The more times I buy it, the easier it is to buy it. And that's kind of opposite how usually these games go. You want it to be easy to get a buff in the beginning and then harder in the end. So I'm not really thrilled with the direction that this has gone, but it is definitely doing what we intended it to do. So my cash per second is working out nicely, and my cash per click is working out. So I think we're good here. And so next tutorial, so I think this is a good stopping point for tutorial 3. In the next tutorial, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to get cash per second buffs working, and then we're also going to learn how to parameterize this so that we don't have to manually set positions. And again, we'll allow the designer to just set everything in the game manager and not have to do any object manipulation. So that'll be our next tutorial. So I hope that this one worked out for you. As usual, if you like this tutorial and you found it helpful, please like and subscribe. And as always, in closing, we ask you to just keep on creating. Have a great day, nerds. Enjoy your evening.